Hi, folks. I'm Ben Hockenberry from the Tom Finucane branch of Comhaltas Region of the Irish Musicians Association of Rochester, New York. And today we're going to be exploring the history of the branch and along with it, a much broader story of Irish music in America. So I'm really excited here to be interviewing one of my personal heroes and friends in the Irish music community, Mr. Ted McGraw. So Ted has long been a tireless and selfless supporter of Irish music and musicians, and his contributions have been wide-ranging. He's the broadcaster of the longest-running Irish music radio show in North America, one of the founding officers of our Rochester, New York Comhaltas branch, the archivist for Comhaltas North America, and the first archivist, right, for Comhaltas North America?
As far as I know, there's not been another one.
There's that. And the accordionist for the Blackthorn Ceilidh Band, along with mentoring and playing with countless musicians and researchers throughout the years. And he hardly shows signs of slowing down, having recorded his first full-length album at the age of 80 and continuing to explore research and recording pursuits. You're currently working on a big recording project, right?
I'm trying to document all the different tunes that I picked up over the years before I can't play the instrument anymore.
If that ever happens, we'll see. So, Ted, I'd love to hear more about the people and the places from early in the time of the Rochester Irish Musicians Club, right? That was what it was before it became Comhaltas chapter?
Yeah, there's two starting dates there. There's the Irish Musicians Club, and then later on the Comhaltas branch. We finally got around to joining the Comhaltas. That was 73, I think it was. We had been meeting at the Harps Club out on Buffalo Road there for a number of years. But it was always kind of haphazard. Usually on a Friday night, mostly on Fridays. Some of the musicians would stop in and be there to play a couple tunes and, have a little chat. And but you never know who's going to show up or if anybody was going to show up. So around about August of 73, I took a little survey of some other guys and said, why don't we get together and we'll set a night. We'll set once a month when we know we're going to be here. And Tommy Finucane at the time lived fairly close. He was the guy that had the key and opened up on Fridays. So we knew it was going to be open. And we picked the second Friday of the month. And at that time there was at least 10 native-born traditional musicians in Rochester. So I sent out a little letter to them and explaining what we were going to do and the date we'd picked. And we'd like to organize a little musicians group. And it went from there. I mean, the thing everybody was very much in favor of it. And we never formed any kind of a formal organization type of thing. Mm-hmm. Mainly because nobody wanted to do it. I mean, we got together to play the music and, and talk about it and nobody wanted to be a chairman or nobody wanted to be a secretary or we didn't have any need for having a treasurer. So we went along with the Dan McGrath rules of the day and didn't bother with any of that stuff.
So who were the folks involved at that time? You and Dan McGrath? And
myself and the two Finucane brothers from Kerry, Jim and Tom. The Walker brothers, Johnny and George from Limerick. Frank Murphy from Mayo. Brian Clancy used to come in once in a while. And he was from Galway. What else did we have? I think that was probably the core of some of the musicians. There were others, of course.
All the Irish Americans and
all of those Irish Americans also. I was thinking of all the native-born ones too. Some of them came out once in a while, and some of them didn't. Now they're all gone, except Brian. Brian Clancy's the last one of the native-born players that left. Joan Rutherford used to come down. She played the piano. We had a piano in the club there. And I remember the first gig we had. We still, and that probably was in the spring of the following year. So that would probably be 74. There was a lady at the Rochester Museum and Science Center who put together a thing called the International Folk Festival on the grounds of the establishment there on East Avenue. And we said we'd come down there, and a bunch of us would play some tunes, so which we did. And we brought a couple of dancers with us, I think, from one of the schools, and put on a little show for them. I still have the playlist of tunes we played that day.
When would that have been?
That would have been probably 74.
Okay.
Well, probably not really 74. Probably spring of 74. I forget now when they used to hold those festivals. But in the paperwork associated with that with the Irish Musicians Club is the flyer for that organization, plus the copy of the playlists and the rest of the stuff. But the session that we were having, those sessions, Father Bill Hodge, he wasn't Irish born, but he and a fellow priest friend of his, Lee Bartlett, used to come down, and Father Bill played the piano accordion, and he was really into the Irish music. I think he's since moved down to Atlanta. I don't know if he's still down there or not, but somewhere down the East Coast. Real nice guy. So actually we did form some people who had an interest in say, well, we got to have some officers. But we never really paid much attention to it, as far as officers go, or what their duties were, or anything like that. We were more interested in
people who
getting together
were going to do the thing, did the thing.
Yeah. So when Bill McAvoy found out about our successful venture up here in Rochester, he was down in Long Island at the time, and he was the Comhaltas representative here in the States. And he started telephoning me and he said, hey, you guys ought to really join Comhaltas. And we said, why? We don't need to join Comhaltas. What good would it be for us? So he kept badgering us anyway. In the meantime, I had looked at the Traditional Irish Musicians Association, who were still going strong at that time. That was a group in Chicago. They also had branches in New York City, I believe. But who was the guy out in Chicago? Name slips. Thornton, Frank Thornton, I think, ran the Chicago Irish Musicians Organization. And we had shared some letters back and forth on how to set up an Irish musicians group. And copies of those letters I still have somewhere. But we had their bylaws, copy of their bylaws, and we were going to, sometime in the future, we were going to organize them a little better. And the opportunity came up when we had this meeting at our house with the McGraths, Pat Carey, Scott Utley, Mike Ryan, and who else? Seems at least those people. And they said, why don't we join Comhaltas? I think we're ready. We'll do the officer stuff. We'll do the work if you'll be the chair. Oh, yeah.
The chair doesn't do work.
So I got to go to all the meetings. That's what they want. Somebody to go to the bloody meetings.
That's the work.
That's the work involved. So anyway, we joined Comhaltas at that time, and Jack Pendergast, who was how was Jack at that time? This was before the provincial level started. So Jack was the secretary of the musicians groups that were in upstate New York and New England. He came up to Rochester and checked us out, as well as Pat Dugan from Utica. She was involved. And we got an official certificate from Comhaltas when they accepted the Rochester branch in to Comhaltas organization. And I think that was probably early '74. So it was, we had those meetings in, not '74, 80,
Okay.
80
12 years earlier.
87, that would be early '87, because we started having those meetings in '86.
Okay.
But we didn't get the official certificate until the beginning of 87. So we always said we joined Comhaltas in '86. And went from there. I started going to the meetings. They had the first North American meeting down in New York City. And that was most interesting, to go down there and meet the people and see who else was involved in organizations in New York and in Boston and up and down the line. They had established by that time, they were about to establish the branch in Utica, because that's where the Dugans lived. They were very interested in pushing that. And Jim O Looney was the main power of the speaker or the music down there. Jim played the button accordion. He was from Killarney, from Kerry. And when we lived in Rome, Bridgie and I lived in Rome from '60 to '66. I worked at the Air Force Base down there.
Okay.
And got to know Jim pretty well, because Jim was the Irish musician for that area. And there was one other fella that played the button accordion, and there was an organization or a group of people, musicians and dancers, who were organized by one of the people down there in Utica and put on shows. So I got in with that group and had a lot of fun putting on shows down there and playing tunes together. I learned a lot from Jim and been a good friend for years and years. They're all gone now, all those people. And well, what else is there?
So what are some of the other highlights of the experience you had while working with Comhaltas? Like you got to meet a lot of the folks from the different regions, particularly.
Yeah, that was probably the main thrill of that, is meeting other musicians and find out what they were doing all over the country. And we used to go to the meetings at the annual meetings, especially once the North American provincial group got its status. That was probably somewhere in the late '90s. We were trying to figure that out one time to put a date on it. I couldn't put a date on when that actually happened. But Bill was, of course, the head at that time.
Bill McAvoy.
And then Frank Kennedy took over from Bill. But it was the meetings up and down most of the ones that we could drive to, we went to at that time. If they got too far away, they didn't have any meetings that were, or the big conventions, the provincial groups, they didn't have many of them that were very far away at that time. It wasn't until later on that they started holding them in St. Louis and Chicago and various places. There was a couple of nice Canadian ones that were held. We went to them. It was great to get up in there, because I knew a lot of the music from up in that area.
One of your other areas of musical interest is the music of the Northeast and Southeast Canada.
Yeah, the East Coast of Canada, the Down East music, which is similar to Irish. The Ottawa Valley music, even some of their dancing, especially their clog dancing, is very similar to Irish step dancing, the old Shan style. A lot of the tunes are the same. And some great musicians from up in there. Definitely. And a lot of the ones from French Canada. There was a huge influx of Irish immigrants came into French Canada, and they brought their music with them. So a lot of the French Canadians, as well as the regular English Canadians played a lot of Irish music in their repertoires. So, you know, it was interesting to see that. French Canadians put any kind of a name on a tune. They didn't care about names. They put whatever name came into their head, I guess, on some of the tunes. But you'd recognize it immediately as the Teetotalers Reel or, you know, something like that. Very well-known tune.
Borrowing from all the different traditions. So that tune being one that's shared between a lot of different places.
Yeah, a lot of those tunes were the four-hand reel. There was a great accordion player from Montreal area, Tommy Duchesne, played the big 5-row continental chromatic, and he has an amazing version of the four-hand reel. I forget what he called it, but it was just they put so much energy into some of their music. It was great.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you did with the archives of Cultus North America?
Well, Frank Kennedy was the one that really was the spark plug there, and he had this was right around the year 2000, maybe plus or minus a year, that he had made the contact with Boston College, because I think we all knew, at least people on this side of the pond knew, that Cultus wasn't going to give us any money to build a building for God knows how many $1 million and then be able to maintain it with a staff for another huge amount of money every year. That wasn't going to happen. So the best way to, if we were going to establish any kind of an archive, we needed a repository. And I figured the best way to do it is to hook up with an institution who already had an archive type of system going. Boston College did, and they were, of course, they had the Irish Music Center there. Boston College IMC, Boston Irish Music Center, headed up with a real librarian, Beth Sweeney. So Frank had made the contact with them and determined that they were interested. And then I was the one that kind of set up the details with Beth as to exactly how we would work it. You know, would I collect the materials and then take them to Boston or send them to Boston? There was a form we had to fill out to make it all legal. These were donations. They were supposedly cataloged according to the library standards. They would be made available to the public. They weren't restricted in any way. And that's the way we set it up. So some of the people who had mail-in stuff, say from, not myself, chose to mail it directly into BC, and that was fine too. We'd send the forms through the mail or email or whatever. And that's the way we had set it up. And that worked out very well. And as part of the plan right from the start, Boston College wasn't the only place we were going to establish a cultist archive. We were thinking of Chicago, certainly, and maybe even further out west somewhere at some point in time, and Canada. And two places in Canada that I had looked at were the Municipal Museum at Newfoundland, and there was a contact up there, and the National Museum in Ottawa. And I did have a very good meeting with a fellow in Ottawa who turned out to be Shelley Posen at the time. And I knew who he was because he was on Mick Maloney's first album. He played the guitar, so he knew Irish music, and he knew Mick, and he knew a lot about the whole scene. So that was great. So I thought, this guy's, we maybe have an in by this guy. And it turned out they were very interested. The only problem was the Canadians were not. The cultist Canadians didn't want anybody messing with their materials, and especially anybody from the States. And so that whole idea of setting up a North American archive just fell apart in Canada. But the thing at Boston College set up was going great guns there for a while. And we were getting a lot of donations. And we never did get to establish any other archives at the time. I think some of the interest fell off, especially after Frank left the provincial chair.
Frank Kennedy?
When he stepped down from the provincial chair, there wasn't anybody to take his place who had the vision that he had, especially due to archives and some other things as well. So a lot of that just kind of died out. But I was never been told yet that I wasn't the archivist.
So you are still on the books.
I found a box of materials after we moved in here in this place. I thought, geez, hadn't I sent that up to Beth at Boston College? There's this little box of stuff. It was a whole bunch of pictures from the Hall of Fame meetings and their brochures and that. So I called up Beth and I said, hey, look, I got this box here. This should be up there in your place. And she said, yeah, sure, send it up. So I was still doing that, but within the past 2 years. That's been a lot of fun. I met a lot of people in the archive business. I got a chance to investigate all the materials at the Cultural, because I used to stay there when I got at the provincial level. When I was the delegate, we used to stay right there at the Cultural, and they had a whole series of bedrooms up on the top floor. So I got to prowl around there and look at all the material that they had in there. There was some amazing stuff, but it was never cataloged. Nobody knew what anything was. You couldn't find anything. Just
in a box that was labeled.
It was in a box, yeah. In a box or on a shelf or something, So I still think we had the best system going because we had the stuff cataloged according to library standards. Boston College came up with a beautiful finding aid. And so we knew what we had, we knew where to find it, and they were anxious to help people find it. I've known researchers that have gone in there and spent a lot of time looking at the various parts of that archive.
Great.
But there were other archives, or I would probably better say collections of material in various parts of Ireland, and I got to see all of them too. The Sligo, the Cultural Center in Sligo had an attachment to the Coleman House, which is 3 miles up down the road, and they had a setup in there. Was a whole wall of locally made tapes of various artists. There was another, Cushnahauna and Ennis and Clare had a great collection of materials too. And I don't know whether they've ever done anything with those or cataloged them or, had an archivist really come in there and do that job or not. I'm not sure. I haven't been back there in a long time. But there's a lot of stuff around, a lot of material.
On the topic of collections, you were an active radio broadcaster and a record collector for quite some time.
Yeah.
Still are, to some degree.
Well, I started collecting those records back in 1952. I was still a teenager. A lot of that music came over from Canada, and I was listening to it on the radio. Plus, we had Pat Murphy from Mayo, just from up around Castlebar. He did a radio program here in Rochester, the Irish Melodies.
Oh, okay. So there was a show before the Irish Party House.
Oh, yeah. And that's where I got a lot of my inspiration from, was Pat.
Irish
and
Melodies.
Got to know the music and the records from him. And the places where to get them. He was the one that gave me the addresses of O'Byrne Witts in Boston, which was a mail-order Irish record store. And there was a couple of other places that I found along the way. Blarney Castle Products Company in Brooklyn was another shop that had a mail-order Irish record business going.
Was that how you got into Irish music, through hearing that show?
Well, Pat's show, yeah. Plus, I started collecting the records, even from just go downtown to Levis's music store. They had the bins of all the 78s at that time. That was the media back in the early 50s. And there was a whole section of Irish stuff in there. So I remember the first records that I bought were down at Levis's music store. One, Leo Rowsome, the piper, one of the Kincora Cayley band, and one of Frank Lee's Tara Cayley band.
So you were a teenager when you were going into record stores and finding Leo Rowsome.
Yeah.
That's pretty
amazing,
cool.
Huh? Yeah, I still had those records when I turned them over to the archive out in Milwaukee. Great stuff.
What were some of the challenges you encountered in broadcasting? For how many decades was it that the Irish Party House was running? I
started it in 74 and the middle of 17. 43 years I ran that show. Probably a couple of the most difficult times was when you see, when I started the show, they had just, I've always wanted to do it because I had this stuff, and nobody was doing
sharing
it.
what you have.
Yeah, nobody was doing it. And Pat had given up his show a long time before that. He only ran for 3 or 4 years, I think. And here I had all this stuff. So I was looking around for a place to do it. I was after we moved back to Rochester here. So 74, around there. The high school down at Greece Athena, there was a English teacher in there, I think he was, who also was interested in broadcasting. So he taught broadcasting. So they were just about to start up this station run by the students down there. And they were looking for community volunteers to do some of the night programs. So when I went down to talk to Lou Betstead at the time, he said, sure, come on in. So that's when I started down there. I had one of the students as an engineer.
Okay.
And that lasted for around, I don't know, six or 8 months or so, 6 months. And in the meantime, I decided to find out how to get my broadcast license, which I did. I had to study the little book and drive to Buffalo to take the test, and got my license, which surprised the station manager, Lou, down at WGMC, because he didn't even know I wasn't going to do that. So I walked in and showed him the license. Then he allowed me to broadcast. I was the combo operator, they call it. At that time, you broadcast and you set up the records and you did the whole thing. And also at that time, being a public service station, there wasn't any money involved. So that, of course, was the benefit. But we did have to give public service announcements. So I had to tear off what came in on the teletype, the old-fashioned teletype machines, and pick out some stories and read little blurbs of local interest as part of the Irish radio show. So we had all the events going, calendar events and requests and all that stuff for years and years. But then the school found out that they've got this radio station on their hands, and it was costing them a little bit of money because they had to pay for the license and some of the equipment and that. And the station was very anxious to raise the power so you could get it south of Driving Park Avenue. So
had like a 1 mile radius.
Not quite as that bad, but almost. The station thought it'd be a good idea to start charging for airtime. So of course, well, what? Oh boy, how am I going to do this? I don't have any money. We got to raise money for airtime. So we started holding benefit dances for the radio show. So I could hold a benefit dance. I could hold one benefit dance and rake in enough money to pay almost the whole entire year's airtime bill at that time, which was pretty darn good. We'd get over 300 people at those dances.
Wow.
And we'd have the ladies that come in with a bake sale. We had the men volunteer to do the bar, and all the stuff was contributed. We had a stage full of tickets we used to sell, giveaway tickets, raffle tickets. We'd have raffles. We had a whole stage full of donated stuff we could raffle away during the dance. And we had door prizes, another pile of stuff we'd give away, door prizes. So it was really great.
Mm-hmm.
The thing was going very well. And as I say, those dances kept the show going. We wouldn't have succeeded without them. And that lasted up through right through the 90s before WGMC. Well, WGMC got, they wanted to change their format into a jazz station, so they got rid of most all the ethnic programs except the polka bandstand. And Ray Serafin's still doing the polka show out of GMC. But the other programs all went at that time, so that's when I switched to 3WG at the time for the same rate, so it was the same money involved, but that was a commercial station, so I had to do commercials, or I could sell commercials. So we did some of that as well. Pain in the neck. And I have to record these commercials on the little carts and plug in the carts and do the commercials through the show.
So you recorded the commercials for the companies, or?
Yeah. Nobody else to do it.
Wasn't sure if they were submitting the commercials, but
I did the whole ball of wax there.
Awesome.
But then, of course, they were being bought out, I think. They were going to go under there for a while. And I was looking around and found out that some of the early GMC folk shows had moved to the U of R station. So that's when I joined the U of R. And that was a huge benefit again because there was no airtime fee that I had to pay.
Gotcha.
Which, and that worked up right until I retired the show.
43 years is a good run.
Yeah, John was helping me with the show there for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Your son, John?
Yeah, my son John. He was interested in doing it. And especially when we got the pub, we could advertise all the bands that he brought in. Mm-hmm. And he was bringing a lot of groups from out of town in to play at the pub.
That was McGraw's Irish Pub.
Yeah.
That you and John combed.
Yeah, then Sarah helped me for a little while, and then John.
Your granddaughter.
Yeah.
So 3 generations in one show. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
What was it like working with your family on a radio show like that?
Oh, we got along great. Yeah. Yeah, John really got into the music. He liked the music a lot.
Yeah, he was also a chapter chair for Rochester Comhaltas.
That's right. Yeah.
Interesting. He was a non-player, but super dedicated to just putting together concerts.
Yeah, he did a lot of
arranging everything.
He fooled around with the tin whistle a bit. He could play a couple tunes.
Hey.
And the boron, he had a nice boron he used to play.
He fooled me. So, switching gears, you've been a mentor and a session mate to so many people, and you've taught tunes and techniques in a number of settings. In my experience, you've presented at the Irish Music Workshop Days at Nazareth in St. John Fisher that we do every year. The monthly Button Box Club we had going for quite some time. And we can kind of guarantee that you're going to bring some new tune to a session all the time, and people will learn it from you. I get the impression that you don't really think of yourself as a teacher, but you clearly are somebody who just has so much to give.
Just interested in sharing what I have, and interested in the music, and letting everybody know about it, I guess. Mm-hmm. I remember some of those early sessions too. Even when we started the session at the Harps Club, the Irish Musicians Club, I had a list of people that I called just before those sessions every month to make sure they were coming. Mm-hmm. And I kept track of that and who came and who didn't come for a few months until the thing got going, until I got off the ground. And I always made those sessions welcoming to anybody who wanted to come in and play a tune. We had all kinds of people come in there. And some I heard complaints about they weren't very good or something like that, But I always tried to make people always, no matter who they were, feel very welcome to come in.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the features that I was always pushing.
Inclusivity, getting people involved. Cool.
Be welcoming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you ever have formal teachers? Like, you learn tunes from Frank Murphy and from folks like that. Were any of them a formal teacher to you?
No.
No.
No,
Figured out where the buttons go.
Yeah, we used to go down to Frank's kitchen and sometimes on Friday nights, a couple of us from school.
Mm-hmm.
Frank could have us down and play a few tunes in his kitchen there. And, he'd go over the tune with us a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But there was nothing formal about it or no teaching methods involved.
No pedagogy.
Stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah, keys were always a problem because of the button accordions. That can be interesting. Another whole field in itself.
Yeah. You've played a couple different types of button accordions. The BCD is what I've most associated with you, but you also play C sharp D.
Yeah, I like the C sharp D. I always wanted a D roll.
Mm-hmm.
Because I did a lot of stuff on the straight row.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot of tunes on the straight row, mainly from those old guys.
Was that the type that Frank played?
Frank played mostly on the single row, but Frank was a great musician, and a huge number of tunes from him that are still played in this area.
Mm-hmm.
But he played the D sharp.
Oh, okay.
So if you play for Frank, like he had a banjo player with him at the Hibernian Club, Neville O'Connor, and always tuned the banjo up half a note.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so so there was no problem. If there was another guy came in that wanted to play the piano, he had to fool around a bit in order to be playing and
reaching the piano.
Yeah, and he was good too. They did when it was a big night and they had those guys upstairs instead of down in the basement. Frank and Neville brought in the piano player with them, and that made a nice sound. They were very good. Neville was from Tipperary. I don't know where the piano player came from. That was the only time he showed up was on big nights.
When there was a paycheck.
But yeah, the keys. I went to the BC and D because I wanted to stop carrying around two boxes.
Okay.
And I wanted the D row. And the BC, when Tommy Finucane came in, he said, "What are you doing with that thing?" He said, "BC, go BC, get a BC box." That's what he had. And he said that the crossover is so easy. You go out for the half notes. That's the way to do it. Go out for the half notes. Don't start going in. So, so I used the BC for C, F, and G. Mostly G. I played the G on the BC rows.
Okay.
So that's where the BCD came from. One box, I can play all my stuff on it.
Mm-hmm. Got a Melodies and a BC all in one.
Yeah.
So we're into a new phase of music. It feels like right now.
Oh yeah.
With how we're surrounded by solely digital music all the time. It feels like, and the COVID-19 pandemic has particularly accelerated that. What have you been excited by in this past year of craziness? Any recording projects or opportunities that you've had to work with folks who you haven't before?
Well, for that kind of thing is this documentation I'm working on, trying to record my tunes, something I've been wanting to do for a long time. But, there's been a tremendous change, as you say, in the music, and the way it's presented. There's, the players are so good these days.
Mm-hmm.
Just an amazing amount of talent out there. There's just so much of it. I don't even know how to absorb it all. And a lot of it I don't even try anymore. You can't keep up with it.
There's a
Nobody
new
can keep
album
up with it
released
anymore.
every week.
And a lot of it's changing too. The whole session thing is changing. And the old guys, the session, a lot of it was social. You went there to meet people and talk to them. You didn't go there just to sit and play a tune all night long. There were social gatherings. And you'd play all kinds of stuff. You wouldn't play just reels or jigs and reels, maybe a hornpipe now and then. They'd play a lot of the song tunes, the waltz tunes. They'd play marches, they'd play the set dances. They'd play all kinds of stuff. And once in a while, a dancer would come in and do some dancing, and then you'd have to pay attention because you wouldn't want to stop right in the middle of a dance. Or somebody come in and sing a song. Marty always sang a song. The Irish Jaunting Car was one of his classics that he used to sing.
Marty O'Keefe.
Marty O'Keefe, yeah.
So you, in the sessions these days, you haven't been necessarily getting as much of the social experience.
You don't get that. No, you don't get the social experience that we had in the old days. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the things you've been missing during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly not being able to leave this beautiful home?
Yeah, that's I miss going to some of the sessions. I always like the one at Johnny's. I like the one at Lima. Those are the two that I went to most of the time. I used to go down to Barry's here on Saturday, their session. Sit in for a while. Yeah, you missed that, sure. Missed the opportunity of being able to play out. I just get a few gigs every once in a while.
Yeah, especially now in March.
Yeah, I mean,
that
whole scene is gone.
Yeah. Some folks have been gigging out, it seems, but not nearly what we would have experienced in any other year.
I haven't really gotten into any of them. I've seen, you put on a bunch of stuff. I haven't been paying too much attention to the Zoom meetings. I think I went to one of the sessions.
Yeah. There's definitely there's stuff going on digitally, but it seems like it's actually starting to open up physically as well. Like as more people are getting vaccinated,
and that's good. That's good to see it coming back. And it's not going to go away because there's just too much of it and too much interest in it.
Yeah, people want to have music live.
Yeah.
Well,
the repertoire has changed a lot too, and that's gotten a lot more complicated than it ever was too. Yeah.
What sort of changes in repertoire have you recognized?
The higher concentration of say reels that aren't that easy to play.
Mm-hmm. Like definitely not down the row.
Yeah, I mean, there was stuff I couldn't play anymore.
Thanks, Finn Bardwire.
I'm finding that now as I'm trying to document some of these tunes and record them. Like, gee, did I really play that? I have to relearn that thing.
Yeah, you've forgotten more tunes than you know.
Probably. I probably have. I still got a bunch of them that I haven't even thought about recording. I might get to. The ones that I've recorded are the ones that I'm still able to play, and tunes that I liked and collected a long time along the way, or from recordings that I've heard. A lot of the stuff I got from recordings. Irish and Scottish music. I mean, Shan was a wonderful accordion player, and some of his solo recordings are people that hear those today are just amazed at how clean that style was.
Oh yeah, he just has that perfect attack, the punchy Jimmy Shan sound.
I love that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The punchiness you get too from the single roll.
Mm-hmm.
And he never played the single roll, but
he was BCC sharp.
Yeah. I was laughing there. I had his son do some work on an accordion for me. It was one of Jim's Jim's big box, which Jim never really liked because it was hard to play, and it was a club model. So we had to change around some notes and make it non-club. And that's one of the ones I made the mistake of changing the inside row to D. And I took it back to Jimmy Shan Jr. When we were over there. We went over there twice. The second time I took it back to him and I said, Jimmy, can you fix this note for me? It was one of the notes that wasn't working right. And he said, yeah. And his father was out of town the first time we were there. But he was back the second time. And Jimmy had asked me to come down to the dance. I got to go to the dance at the Lutton Town Hall, which was their hall where they held their dances. And got a chance to go back to Jimmy Shan Sr.'s house the next day before we left. And he picked up that box that his son had worked on and started fooling around with it. He said, what did you do to this thing? And I got a slap on my hand from the great Jimmy Shan. What did you do to this thing? He said. And I put the D-bro instead of the BCC sharp. And he was disgusted with that.
Like, I can't even play this thing anymore.
Oh, damn, he could play it.
I'm sure he could. Well, so it's been a real pleasure to get the chance to talk with you today. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this information with future generations of Irish musicians in the region and beyond.
Yeah.
So, thanks a lot.
Come back anytime.
Certainly.